Moments ago, the president picked Judge Brett Kavanaugh to replace the outgoing Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy. Of course, this was not a surprise. In an unprecedented move, Judge Kavanaugh was selected from a previously released list of 25 originalist justices, making this just one more example of how this president is the most transparent president in history and also keeping a clear promise to the American people. Now, clearly, this was not a decision that the president took lightly. Now, President Trump, in many ways, there's political aspects to this, and he had to thread a political needle. And by the way, he has to think about senators like Collins and Murkowski, and then on the other side, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, Rand Paul of Kentucky. In other words, pick a judge with a very narrow margin in the U.S. Senate who could also successfully maneuver through a confirmation hearing and garner the votes from a majority of senators. Without a doubt, Justice Kavanaugh is an extremely qualified candidate. Educated at Yale, Kavanaugh clerked under Justice Anthony Kennedy, just like Neil Gorsuch. In the 1990s, he served as an associate counsel for Ken Starr. That, of course, during the investigation into then-President Bill Clinton. During that time, it was interesting, Kavanaugh did push a controversial opinion that Bill Clinton had, in fact, obstructed justice by sometimes making false public statements or sending surrogates out to do such about Starr's investigation. Judge Kavanaugh, in a very interesting piece that he talked about in 2009, he did change course, and he publicly changed his opinion on the issue of obstruction in what was a very powerful article that was in the Minnesota Law Review. We'll go over that in more detail. In 2006, he was appointed by George W. Bush to serve on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, where he amassed a lengthy record of very key important decisions. It's considered one of the most important courts in the land, including multiple opinions against the overreach of then-President Obama's EPA, other opinions that, in fact, bolstered our Second Amendment rights. One point of concern was Judge Kavanaugh's mixed track record on one issue, Obamacare. But after years on the D.C. Court of Appeals, what is his originalist and constitutionalist track record is fairly extensive and fairly robust. And by the way, to all you never-Trumpers out there all across America, you tried so hard to prevent a Trump presidency. Are you happy tonight at all? Can you admit you were wrong at all? Are you happy about, let's see, tax cuts, promises made, promises kept? Are you happy that this was not Hillary Clinton tonight appointing a judicial activist, a left-wing activist to the Supreme Court? Are you happy you don't have two radical judges on the Supreme Court? Would you rather have Hillary Rodham Clinton making this selection tonight? Now, in moments, we're going to give more analysis of Judge Kavanaugh. It is also important to review the extreme measures that the left in America will take in order to malign, besmirch, destroy the reputation of Judge Kavanaugh and also his family that you saw tonight. It's a story as old as time. For decades, every single solitary nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court by a Republican president has been met with the same destructive tactics from the Democratic Party. Now, regardless of who was nominated, regardless of what their qualifications, regardless of their track record, even an adherence to the U.S. Constitution, the foundation of our laws in this, of course, republic that we live in, a constitutional republic, you have the left, you have Democrats and their friends in the media, that their echo chamber, always conducting what is a malicious campaign to impugn the character of good people, the track record of good people, frankly, anybody that President Trump would have nominated to the Supreme Court. The language gets downright apocalyptic, and this time is no different. Let's just go back. Let's take a look at how the left was treating President Trump's nomination before the announcement tonight. It is really bordering on insanity. Watch this.
You just have to remember how extensive the conservative agenda is here for the Supreme Court. It's not just rolling back abortion rights. It's not just rolling back gay rights. It's not just eliminating affirmative action. It's not just expanding the death penalty.
I've never recall a previous president outsourcing at least the initial selection process to an outside interest group, the way that this president has to the Federalist Society.
A woman's freedom to make sensitive health care decisions hang in the balance with this nominee. It is near impossible to imagine that President Trump would select a nominee who isn't hostile to our health care law and health care for millions and millions and millions of Americans, who isn't hostile to a woman's freedom to make her own health care decisions.
For the president, it's going to be all about the personal connection, who he feels comfortable with in the moment.
So you're saying he's going to pick the man, the white man.
So as REM once put it, the end of the world as we know it.
I've never seen a president of the United States, in effect, make himself a puppet of outside groups and choose from a group of right-wing fringe ideologues.
I frankly don't even think we should be considering this nominee.
Now, none of this rhetoric is surprising at all. None of it's new. One of the most notable smear campaigns from the Democrats took place in the 1980s during Ronald Reagan's nomination of an originalist, an intellectual, to the Supreme Court. His name was Judge Robert Bork. And by the way, he was never confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court, in large part because of what was lying and fear-mongering and just frankly smearing by people like Senator Ted Chappaquiddick Kennedy. You may remember this. Take a look.
Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions, blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters, rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight raids, and school children could not be taught about evolution. Writers and artists would be censured at the whim of government.
What the Democrats did to Judge Robert Bork was so egregious that it inspired a new term called borking. And years later, borking was in full play during the confirmation hearings of now Supreme Court.
Durbin led the smear campaign against Kavanaugh 12 years ago, calling Kavanaugh the Forrest Gump of Republican politics, which only underscores how obtuse and partisan Durbin is. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. And the left is already conjuring up the hysteria, claiming that this means abortion will be outlawed in America. That's simply untrue, even if you overturn Roe v. Wade, and I doubt that happens. But if it does, that means the decision reverts back to the states.
What
and
I read
it won't
on
be
original,
outlawed.
that's such an important point, by the way, because that New York, New Jersey,
Yeah.
45, 6, 7, 8 states are not going to, they might have different views on it, different restrictions, first 3 months, parental consent, all sorts, but there are going to be very liberal states. It does not mean that abortion is going to be outlawed.
It's a lie perpetuated by the left. And that's all true. Let me ask a political question, Dr. Gorka. This now, if, again, the White House says they expect him confirmed by October 1st, leading into this very important midterm election, that does mean a couple of things, not the least of which red state Senate Democrats, Manchin, Claire McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp, Bill Nelson, they've got themselves one really tough decision to make. Dick Durbin is telling them, oh, risk your entire political career. And he said it before the nomination was even announced.
Yes, look, the reaction already, Greg's absolutely right, is all you need to know about Kavanaugh. The fact that the DNC has already stated that this man shouldn't be anywhere close to the Supreme Court. The fact that Chuck Schumer has just announced that he will use every weapon in his arsenal to stop this nomination.
He said that last week before he was nominated, so that's shocker.
Right. So this tells you that this is the right man for the job, but it tells you that November is going to be very, very tough for the Democrats. I just want to make sure the White House is listening. Bill Shine, this is going to be a very important communications message because this is going to be worse than Bork. I give you the prediction now. They will use every dirty trick in the book to block this nomination, but we can't get it through.
I played Ted Kennedy with Robert Bork. It was despicable what that Mr. Chappaquiddick said. It was a disgrace to the U.S. Senate. And then what they did to Clarence Thomas was a disgrace to the U.S. Senate.
Absolutely.
But it's going to happen.
Sure.
I've been saying this for weeks. It's predictable.
And it doesn't matter who President Trump would have nominated. The same smears would have occurred. But I admire President Trump. He had the courage to make the right choice, notwithstanding the fact that he could have chosen somebody who would have been an easier confirmation. But no, he made an important choice, the right choice, a brilliant